Hi everyone, it's John Mitchell, and in today's video we're going to look at the management of materials and again look at a number of strategies that businesses can actually use to improve their effectiveness and efficiency. So materials management is all about managing the way the materials are actually received and stored within a business. So businesses need to ensure that they've actually got the right amount of materials on hand so that production can meet the level of demand in the market. Now without materials they won't be able to produce anything, or at least production will need to slow or stop and wait for the materials to arrive. Now, all businesses use materials, whether they be a furniture manufacturer that requires materials such as wood and fabric, a restaurant that requires food supplies, or even a hospital that requires medicine and bandages and the like. Now, to ensure that businesses can actually achieve its goals and produce the goods and services, the operations manager needs to ensure that the materials arrive at the required location, that they arrive on time and in the correct quantities, and also arrive in the desired quality. So they're the kind of things we're going to be looking at today in terms of managing materials. Now, when it comes to materials, the operations manager has a number of key decisions they need to make, because one of the issues that can occur is the business may run out of materials which will prevent the business from actually producing outputs. So, for example, a clothing manufacturer that runs out of fabric or thread will find it actually difficult to make clothes. So that can result in the business not being able to produce enough to meet demand, which is likely going to result in a loss of sales because in stores they'll be sold out. So one of the key questions is how much inventory should a business have on hand so that they don't run out of materials and they can keep production going. So should the business keep enough materials to last them a week, maybe even a month or a couple of months? Maybe they should ensure that they are completely safe and keep the whole year's worth of inventory. That way they are sure to never run out. So these are some of the questions that the operations manager needs to consider. But materials cost money, so that's an important factor to realise. So if a business has invested lots of money to hold stock for a long period of time, they cannot use that money in other areas of the business because essentially that money is tied up in materials that are simply just sitting there until they are needed to go into production. Also, storing materials for long periods of time can cause it to be damaged while it sits in storage. It can get lost, it can get stolen, the stock can even go to waste. So for example, it could be that the item is perishable and is in storage past its use by date and therefore needs to be thrown out, or the parts become obsolete and therefore wasted. So there's lots of issues with holding large amounts of stock for long periods of time. So the operations manager needs to consider how much to actually purchase based on a variety of factors, including having enough materials on hand so that production can flow continuously to meet demand. So I'm not saying here that holding large amounts of stock is not a legitimate strategy. Of course it is. So businesses can do that so that they don't run out and that production can flow continuously. However, they also need to consider the cost of purchasing the materials and having them delivered, the storage required, and if the business has the space for this requirement, and also the cost of storing large amounts of stock, and also if the materials are likely to go to waste while they're being stored. So what we're going to do now is look at specific material strategies that are in our study design that businesses can implement to help manage their materials effectively. The first strategy is forecasting, which is a materials planning strategy that looks at past data and trends to try and predict future demand. Now that helps the operations manager make more informed decisions around materials required because they're getting a really good picture of what the demand's going to be like in the near future. So if the operations manager is able to get a good guide on the amount they need to produce in the future by forecasting future demand, well, it can help them prepare their materials so they have enough on hand to meet that particular demand. So it gives them a really good indication on what they need to order and the materials they need to have. So the operations manager may be able to look at past data. For example, they can look at how much they produced during the Christmas period last year and begin preparing for that increased demand by ordering their materials to arrive on time. They can look at market trends to determine if there will be an increase or decrease in demand for particular products, or they could look internally at business information. For example, they could look at, the business may be launching a new marketing campaign and the marketing team may have projections on the impact they will have on sales, and the operations manager can use that information to determine how much they're going to need to produce in the future. So for each of the 4 strategies that we're going to go through today, we're going to look at how it can help improve the effectiveness and efficiency of the operations for a business. So forecasting can help ensure that the business has enough materials on hand to meet the production needs, which ensures that the consumer demand is being met. So this point can really be used for all of the material strategies that we're going to look at today. And in terms of efficiency, well, forecasting can help improve productivity because production shouldn't need to wait for materials to arrive, because any increased demand will have been forecast, and therefore the business should have the right materials on hand. But also, because it's being forecast, they shouldn't have too many materials also, so it reduces overstocking, which reduces waste. The next strategy is the master production schedule, which is a plan that outlines what is going to be produced, in what quantities, and when it is going to be produced. So it is essentially a really specific plan on the exact goods and services that the business is going to produce and by when. So the MPS is going to outline each good or service that will be produced, the exact quantities, how, when, and where the production will take place. And that helps the operations manager make really informed decisions around their materials, because they can use that information to plan the exact materials that are required to meet what it is they're going to produce. So the MPS helps the business get a really clear picture of what it's going to produce. Now that helps ensure that they're able to produce enough to meet the required demand, and therefore keeping satisfied customers. So because it also plans out when it is going to produce each product, it can plan the materials more effectively and therefore make really informed decisions around their materials. And that leads into efficiency. So because the business knows what it needs to produce, it can ensure that it has enough materials for a continuous flow. So therefore there's no stops waiting for materials to arrive. Also, that results in improved productivity. It also ensures that correct materials are on hand, which prevents any over-ordering of materials and therefore overstocking, and also helps prevent overproduction, which reduces wastage. So all these strategies can sort of link together. So, first of all, the business may decide to forecast and therefore develop a master production schedule based on that forecast, so that they know exactly what they're going to produce for each particular good or service. The next strategy is the materials requirement planning. So that's an itemized list of all materials that are needed to meet specific orders. This can go hand in hand with the MPS, the master production schedule. So the MPS sets out what is going to be produced and when, and the MRP will then outline the materials required to produce what is outlined in the MPS. So they can go hand in hand and work really closely together. So with an MRP, the operations manager really needs to consider the stock they already have on hand. It's therefore important in all businesses to have a system that tracks how much stock the business actually has on hand and how they're using that stock, because that's obviously going to impact how much they need to order to meet their master production schedule. The operations manager also needs to understand the lead times, or how long it takes for the materials to arrive once they are ordered. So that knowledge is really important, because without knowing the lead times, an operations manager may decide to order materials expecting them to arrive on a particular day, maybe in a couple of days' time, only to find out that they actually take 2 weeks to be produced and delivered once they're ordered. So that lead time is really important, and that will vary depending on where they're coming from and the relationship with the supplier also. And also the manager needs to know the exact amount of materials required to meet the orders, obviously. So therefore they can specifically plan out the materials that they need to meet those particular orders. So like all the other strategies, the MRP ensures that there's enough materials on hand for the production to be continuous, again, so there's no hold-ups. That's resulting in less waiting times, waiting for materials to arrive and those types of things. It also ensures there are enough materials on hand to actually meet demand, again, satisfying customers and meeting the demand that's in the market. And in terms of efficiency, having the exact amount of materials on hand to meet an order will prevent any overstocking of materials, which again reduces wastage. The final strategy in our study design for materials is the just-in-time strategy. So just-in-time is a material strategy where the correct amount of materials arrive only as they are needed for production. So instead of keeping large quantities of stock on hand, the just-in-time system ensures that very little stock is actually kept on hand within the business, and the exact amount of materials arrive only as they are needed and very quickly put into production. So this saves money on storage and minimises the issues that come with large amounts of storage that we've gone through earlier, so reducing damaged stock, lost or stolen stock, and other types of wastage. So this can reduce cost and improve efficiency. However, there's a major risk that can happen with a just-in-time. If materials are held up and don't actually arrive on time, then production will likely slow or even stop while it waits for the materials to arrive. So it's a really important strategy that lots of large businesses are using to improve efficiency, but it does have that downside. So to make the operations more effective, again, the just-in-time allows for a continuous flow because materials arrive on time, as long as they do arrive on time. It also allows the business to use their space to maximise production because less space is now required for storage. And also there is less money tied up in having large quantities of stock on hand, allowing the business to use this money elsewhere within the business, and they can push that into operations to try and maximise their operations or improve areas of efficiency. It also can improve efficiency due to the reduced storage costs along with the wastage that comes along from storing large amounts of materials for long periods of time, which obviously reduces wastage. So just to recap, materials cost the business money, so it's important to ensure that they're managed effectively and efficiently. And the 4 strategies we went through today, which are all in our study design so that you can be asked specifically about them, are forecasting, master production schedule, materials requirement planning, and just in time. So for questions, activities, and to find out about our exam preparation lectures, then come on over to teachingbubble.com.